it was either yesterday or the day before you posted on YouTube a quote that said, "People aren't better than you; they're just ahead of you." What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think, and I should say as well, that quote didn't come from me. I'm not that smart. It came from, I think, Alex Hormozy. I think I found it from. But I think, yeah, a lot of people look at other YouTubers who have large followings and they equate that person as more valuable than them intrinsically, or like smarter than them intrinsically, or something like that. And just conveniently overlook the fact that that person's been doing YouTube for 5 years and they've been doing YouTube for 5 weeks. And so I think it's really important to put things into perspective sometimes and think about, like, hey, yeah, sure, that guy might have 50,000 subscribers, but he's been grinding for like 5 years. Whereas, I've only just got started. So it's unrealistic for me to compare my videos and the amount of views I'm getting to his ones and be like, oh, I suck. Because, like, it's just not a realistic comparison.
Completely. Yeah, we talk about this a lot in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know if you do martial arts, but
I do. I love
there's a belt
BJJ.
system. Do you do Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. I had no idea. What belt do you?
I'm a very low belt because I kind of don't necessarily do the belt system. I've done it through an MMA gym, so it's like very
Gotcha.
not belt orientated. It's very just like MMA orientated, but I'm relatively familiar. Yeah,
Sure. So then but I assume you are familiar that white belt, blue, purple,
yeah,
brown, black, and the black belts that run the gym that I came up in, they would always say the same thing, which was the biggest difference between a black belt and a white belt is a black belt has lost more times than a white belt has even attempted to roll with somebody. Like a black
yeah.
belt's been tapped out way more than a white belt has even gotten on the mat and tried to roll with another human being. And I think that is so applicable to just about anything. And that's what I think of when I hear this quote. And yeah, I really love this mentality shift of not really thinking about it in terms of skill, just time and effort, amount of time and effort that's been put into something. So I really, really appreciated that. And like I said before we started recording, I'm just super thrilled to talk to you, man. I've been watching your stuff for forever. I think you have some of the best how-to YouTube content out there. So I
Thank
would
you.
love to just let you strut your stuff to death. Yeah, of course. Let you strut your stuff today. I don't know why that was so difficult to say, but would you be willing, before we jump into any of that, to just share a little bit about your background? Like, when did you start making videos? Why did you start getting into creating content? And then, yeah, what eventually led you to what you're doing so well now, which is teaching other people how to succeed on YouTube?
Yeah, so it started probably in terms of video creation back in like 2011 or 2012. Like, I'd always just loved creating content. I feel like I was a relatively creative person. Um, I was also one of those like teenagers who probably hung on to and played with Lego more than and for longer than they should have. So I still had Lego stuff going on, and I remember, I think I started getting into it by like creating like Lego stop motions and stuff. I remember it just being so cool, like creating these little scenes and these movies and these storylines and all that kind of thing. I never posted anything or whatever. It was just purely for like personal enjoyment. Um, and then from there, I remember I got this little app on my phone. I think it was like called Gun Effects or something like that. And me and my brothers would sometimes get together and like create little movies and stuff, like Western movies and all that kind of thing. Again, we never posted any of it. It was all just for fun. Um, but yeah, I never really saw YouTube as like a viable thing. Like, I always saw it as something that, professionals had to do. And I think maybe the perception back in those days as well of YouTube, since it was a lot fresher, was like a bit different to how it is today. And so I remember this one time though, I went to a family gathering and I was talking to my aunt, and she was telling me about this mutual connection we had, who had grown a YouTube channel to 2,000 subscribers and then it got like 20,000 views on one of their videos. And I remember it just kind of blew my mind because I was like, wait, what? Like, normal people like me can like succeed on YouTube and get like 20,000 views. At the time, 20,000 views was like, mind blown. Um, and so that kind of really opened that door for me because I was like, wow, this is, I guess, possible for a regular pleb like myself to actually like do well there. Like, I don't need a TV like or film degree or something like that. Um, So I remember thinking about it and procrastinating on it probably for like 6 months or something. And eventually I dived in. Um, the first couple of videos I created were so bad that I didn't even post them. Um, but yeah, but basically I dived in, and something not a huge amount of people know, and I don't often talk about it because uh, it's kind of adds a bit of complexity to the story that isn't really needed. My first video actually did really well, like my first ever video. Like I think it got
Hmm.
like over 1,000 views or something like that. And I remember thinking like, oh, this YouTube thing isn't that hard. But I just looking back, I just completely fluked. Um, well, I completely fluked a bunch of things that I should be doing, and following that, the problem was I didn't know what those things were. So following that, I promptly sucked for a year. I only got about 150 subscribers for the entire year. Posted like 70 videos, tried like 10 different niches, all that kind of thing. It just didn't work. Till eventually, I kind of stumbled upon a bunch of things that all came together, and yeah, I went from getting like 15 subscribers per month to getting like 1,000 subscribers per month in the space of like a little over 6 weeks, I think it was. And there, yeah, from there, that channel grew. Gave me a lot of experiences and connections and people I worked with, and got YouTube certified through that and all that kind of thing. And I think I got to the point where I realized that I think I grew that one to like 60,000 subscribers or something. And I got to the point where I realized that I actually didn't really want to be a YouTuber myself anymore. Um,
Hmm.
but I really enjoyed YouTube itself, because I'm actually like an introvert and stuff, which is, I thought I was an extrovert back in the day, but no, apparently not. So I realized I thought I'd, yeah, so due to a bunch of different things, people asking me always about it, and my interest in it and all that kind of thing, I decided maybe I should start like teaching. And so I posted a couple of videos about it. They did relatively well, and I guess the rest is kind of history. That channel grew, created more content and products and interviews and that kind of thing around that. And I guess here we are today.
No, I love it, man. And I want to just sort of slow down and go back to a specific point in that story, which was, you said I discovered a few things that really started to click, and things kind of started it sounded like the momentum really started to shift, and things sped up and expedited pretty quickly. We're going to get into, mistakes that you see YouTube. I mean, you work professionally now with tons of aspiring YouTubers, and obviously your channel is dedicated to aspiring YouTubers. But what did you yourself in your personal experience, what started to click for you, and how did you come to these realizations to, grow more quickly?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I want to preface it by saying there were some definite things that I did that, for me, kind of tipped it over the edge. Um, but I think those things weren't wholly responsible for that. I think YouTube is kind of like growing your channel is almost like plugging lots of holes in like in a dam. There are like multiple different things that have to be happening simultaneously for the channel to actually work. Um, like I can have amazing video content, I can have amazing video ideas, I can have amazing everything, but if my thumbnails suck, pretty much none of it matters. And vice versa with so many other things. So it's like it's not like I'll just do this one thing and it'll work. There's like multiple things that kind of have to be done simultaneously. Um, for me though, the main thing, so like obviously I guess I was plugging all these holes in this dam like throughout the course of that year, even though I wasn't seeing any success because I hadn't plugged all of them yet. There was still some major ones left. But the main one that really clicked for me was finding the right niche. Um, I think I was posting content where the supply and demand just wasn't like a good balance. Like there was a huge amount of competition, a huge amount of big YouTubers posting exactly the same videos I was posting, probably like 10 times better than my videos. And so there was no reason for someone to come and watch mine. And I one of the major things that I did was I ended up shifting to a different type of content during that period where I blew up. And it was a strategic decision, but it was also a little bit lucky in a sense that yeah, I'd picked a niche where it was something I was doing something I was relatively good at and relatively comfortable, and matched the kind of skill set that I built over that one year. And there were lots of people who wanted to watch that content at that time, but there were only like 5 to 10 other like proper creators actually like posting that content. So the supply and demand balance was a lot more in my favor. And so the videos started getting served and started getting tens of thousands of views. So yeah, for me, that was I think the major thing that tipped it over the edge.
What were the biggest mistakes that you made in the beginning of your YouTube journey?
Oh, so many. I mean, people are probably going to hate me for saying this because it's so cliche and everyone says it and everyone knows it. But like, it's just so true. Like, thumbnails need to be good. Titles need to be good. Your intros need to be good. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking their titles and thumbnails and intros are good when they're really not. Like, there's an analogy that I like to think about that I've heard, and I don't know if this is necessarily true, but it sounds good, so I'll go with it. And that is, there's the difference in, I think, in like biological genes between chimps and humans. The only thing that different, we share 98% of our genes with chimps. So it's the 2% that makes the difference. And I think that's kind of very applicable when it comes to like thumbnails and titles and all that kind of thing. Like you can have a thumbnail that's like an 8 out of 10 and it's still probably going to do crap because there's other thumbnails out there that are 10 out of 10s. So like you might be creating good thumbnails, but they might be 7 out of 10s. It might be 8 out of 10s. And that just leads to you getting nothing. It's like YouTube's almost like an all or nothing game. It's like a power law. It's an exponential curve when you get up to those high levels. So yeah, I thought I was creating good titles and thumbnails, and they were good, but the problem was they were good. They weren't amazing and exceptional. So yeah, boring answer. Everyone knows you need to improve your click-through rate. Everyone knows you need to improve your hooks, all that kind of thing. But like, honestly, the biggest mistakes I made, aside from not picking a niche, like I talked about earlier, or a good niche, was just not nailing that stuff.
It's an unfortunate truth that the most boring pieces of advice are often the most beneficial and the most helpful. It's like saying, well, how do I get better at this thing? It's like, well, just practice. Just do way more of that thing and you'll get better. And it's just like, well, but what's the secret, man? It's like, no, literally just do it way more than you're doing it right now. Do it 100 more times and you'll be way better at it. It's just like, but that's so boring that, what's the secret? It's just, that's just the fact of the matter. And I would love to just go through, you have so many, so there's way too many to get to in a single conversation, but I would love to dive into a number of almost like YouTube foundational principles or concepts that I think you highlight so well in your videos.
Thanks.
And the one that genuinely just blew my mind when I first heard you talk about it was the green dot theory. So would you be willing to take us through what the green dot theory is?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I've still got that cough lingering. It's so annoying.
Yeah, hope you're feeling better.
I am a lot better, but that cough just randomly comes back. It's like hung around for like 3 weeks. I'm like, Jesus. All right. So the green dot theory is basically a concept I somewhat modeled off a similar concept created by a guy named Trent Dysmed. And basically, the essence of it is that you can't know where you're going to end up before you actually start on your path. I think this is often also called the corridor principle. Like you don't know what's in the corridor until you step into the corridor. You don't know what's at the end of the corridor until you step into it and actually, start traversing it. So like in essence, most of us get onto the platform and we have this idea, we have this creative vision, or we have this draw to create a certain type of content. And those content, they might be videos about like green dots. And so we get out there, we create our channel, we start making these green dot videos, and they usually suck because that's just how things normally work. And a lot of people quit at that stage. But a small percentage of creators, they don't. They pivot, and they, as a result of creating those green dot videos, maybe they discover, they notice some things that are working. Most things aren't, but they notice a couple of things that are working, and so they investigate those things more. And then they end up finding, hey, maybe I should try and create these other videos, and those videos are blue dot videos. So they recalibrate their channel. They stop creating green dot videos and they go out there and they start creating blue dot videos. And they still suck, but they suck like mildly less, because they've learned from their previous mistakes. And so they go out there, so they start creating these blue dot videos, and then as a result of creating these blue dot videos, they then discover this other type of content, which might be red dot videos. And so they pivot their channel again, and then the channel picks up a little bit more. And this process just keeps on continuing. But I guess the principle that analogy is really trying to highlight is like, you can't actually know where you're going to end up until you get started. And often, like I said, most of the time your green dot videos, or people watching this, if you haven't started YouTube and you've got this idea like for videos you want to create, chances are it's probably not going to work, and you're going to fail, and it's going to suck, and you're going to be sad. But that is going to lead to you maybe finding some little things or some clues as to what does work, and then maybe you'll try that, and maybe that'll work a little bit better, and then maybe through that you'll do the same thing, and that'll work a little bit better. And so, like, for me, when I started, I had no desire or awareness of the fact that I would end up creating the videos that I ended up creating on my first channel at the end that actually blew me up. Like literally wasn't even on my radar. I had no idea I was going to end up creating videos about how to grow on YouTube. Like, none of it. Like if you had told me that when I first started, I would have laughed in your face. But the only reason that happened was as a result of going through that process and creating those different pieces of content. So yeah, it's basically just like try and follow, like, trust the journey if you can, because that's often where the learnings will come from, not necessarily from extensive 5-year planning before your channel's even launched.
So good. So good. Yeah, wisdom is earned is basically how I hear that. Like, no matter how much you prep and plan, create the perfect framework or, the perfect whiteboard, wisdom and real skill just has to be earned through just sifting through the mud for months, years. And I think about this because even for this podcast itself, I did podcasts in the past with just like my friends, just because I thought it would be fun to pretend to be Joe Rogan or pretend to be some of these other YouTubers that I was a fan of. And it was garbage. It was horrible. It was trash. And I still keep one of them up. A few days ago, I was actually faced with a decision. I was like, do I just get rid of this? And I thought, no, let's keep this public so that maybe someone else who is familiar with me in this show can go back and just listen to how bad I was at asking people questions and speaking just in a microphone, because that's where it started. And it's like, it had to start with that. That was my green dot, was just doing something rather than nothing. And cut to, between then and now, I started writing a book and interviewing creators. And it was actually through that process that I found out, wow, I'm just fascinated by people whose work I am fascinated by. I'm fascinated by people whose work I'm fascinated by. I like talking to creators whose work I am inspired by and whom I respect, yourself included. And I was like, okay, well, I can do something with this. And that interest plus my experience of actually having camera gear and having a microphone and speaking into one for a long period of time and editing myself poorly, I might add. It's like all this stuff just combined over years and years and years to be like, oh, well, why don't I start a podcast where I interview YouTubers? I love YouTube. I love talking to people. I love asking creators questions. And I know the basic skills to put something together at least. And there's just absolutely no way I could have even imagined doing something like that 5 years ago when all this stuff started. So Green Dot Theory, again, when I heard you first lay that out, just like spoke to my soul. So thank you for that. I just asked you a few minutes ago about some of the biggest mistakes that you made. But again, and we'll get into the program that you run later, but you spend a lot of time looking at smaller YouTubers, newer YouTubers. You've helped so many people either directly or indirectly through your content grow their channels. What are the biggest mistakes that you see other YouTubers making? And is that answer different than the one that you gave for yourself a few minutes ago?
I think the answer I gave for myself is probably very applicable to a lot of other YouTubers as well, but it'd be boring if I just said that'd be the same. So I guess some of the specific ones beyond just like some of the specific ones just beyond like nailing the fundamentals, um, or maybe even the specific fundamentals that I see people miss a lot is I think the niche one is like really important. And I do think it's really important not to just pick an obscure niche for the sake of picking an obscure niche. Like, you want to be strategic about it and think about, how like where that will lead and what the pros and cons are of it and all that kind of thing. So, because there is a danger to being too niche as well, and pigeonholing yourself in a place that you can never grow out of. Um, but so many people I see, even so many of my students, even after watching all of the lessons and the content, they just keep creating the same types of videos that they were initially or they wanted to create. And like, it's so much more important, like, to be in the right boat than to be rowing hard. I think that's like an
Mm.
analogy Warren Buffett uses. But like, yeah, it's just like the the difference it makes. Like when once you've experienced it, it'll blow your mind, and you'll be like, "Oh, I get it." Like I said, for me, it was the difference. Like it was the defining factor of, or the thing that kicked me over getting 15 subscribers a month to like 1,000. Um, but like, yeah, it just makes such a huge difference, and people seem to think that they can just manipulate the algorithm and like use good click through rate and use good audience retention and just kind of bludgeon their way through and just like force the algorithm to promote the videos when like the market and the supply and demand just isn't in their favor. And most of the time it doesn't work. And if it does work, it's a grind, for many months or potentially many years. So that's a huge one, I think, is people need to be like hold their niche, or hold their niche idea, or focus more on niche ideas, and finding a good one, and then once you find a good one, like, don't be 100% committed to it either, because like we talked about earlier, the green dot theory, often it won't be the one, but it'll be a step a lot
Mm.
closer in the right direction, which might lead to the one. So there's that, and the other one is video ideas. I've talked about it a lot. I think over the last year or so, I used to say like creating. I used to think like creating really high click through rate videos and really high like audience retention videos was the most important thing. And while that is still very important, I guess a nuance that I've come to realize is that the foundational idea itself is so important. And like a way to think about this, or a way I've been thinking about this recently, and I've never actually shared this yet, so I don't know, maybe it'll be dumb and won't make sense. But the like you could have you could have a film crew go in and just film married couples in their daily life and try and create a TV show out of it. And you could probably create a TV show out of it, and it'd be interesting. And people might watch it if you're like really good at what you do, and the film crew are like really good at stitching together the drama and making things interesting and all that kind of thing. Um, but if you could take that exact same film crew and get them to film a show that's more along the lines of, Married at First Sight, for example, where these two couples who don't know each other, they get married on their wedding, like they first meet each other on their wedding day, and then they have to live with each other for 6 weeks or however long it is. Um, Same film crew, same everything. I can always guarantee you that second show is going to do so much better, and like we know it is because it's like blown up around the world. Um,
Mm.
just because the fundamental idea and concept is just more interesting and more novel than just filming couples in their everyday life. And I think like to bring it back to YouTube, like that concept is so important. Like just creating regular let's play videos versus coming up with an actual really unique and original idea that's actually going to excite people, or whatever it is, whatever kind of videos you're creating. Um, that fundamental concept is so important, and that's also going to lead to people being more interested in clicking on your videos and all that kind of thing. Like, um, I think like your idea is actually one of the most fundamental aspects of click through rate. People often think it's all just like graphic design orientated, like all just I have to be a good graphic designer and design an eye-catching thumbnail. It's like, well, yes, that helps, but like if you haven't got something, if that thumbnail doesn't have something highly interesting to represent, then people still aren't going to click. You can be the best graphic designer in the world, but it's not going to work. Um, so yeah, those would be two really big ones. Again, there are a bunch of fundamentals like click through rate and retention and all that kind of thing. Um, but I would say those are probably two of the biggest ones that I see people miss or not give enough attention to.
One of your best performing videos was or is Mr. Beast being a YouTube genius for 10 minutes straight,
Yeah.
which is like a video I've watched 100 times all the way through, just like trying to bury it and ingrain it into my programming. And I always remember a piece of advice that he shares, which is heavily centered around everything that you just said, which is it's easier to make one video that gets 100,000 views than it is 10 videos that get 10,000 views. And what he's talking about there is just taking the time and effort, working harder to just have a very good idea and really execute on that, as opposed to 10 mediocre ideas. Like, what is it? This is probably the wrong use of this phrase, but the piece is greater than the whole of its parts. That's not true. We're getting off track here. Something along those lines. But you mentioned click-through rate, right? These foundational things, retention time. It's one thing that I think you are a master at, is increasing the watch time of not only your videos, but just your channel in general. What are your favorite methods for increasing watch time?
Yeah, good question. Is that across the entire channel, like session time, or like on individual videos?
So great follow-up question. Would you be willing to separate those two? So
Sure.
can you tell us the difference between individual watch time in a video and just session time for a channel?
Yeah, cool. I tend to think about watch time, in two separate buckets. One is the individual video itself, like getting people to watch as much of that video as possible. But then the other one is like watch time across the entire channel, which is getting people to hopefully watch multiple videos. So I think for individual videos, some of the, I guess the things that are really useful is having a really good intro and hook. Obviously, people are a lot more flighty in the first like 30 seconds or minute or whatever. And what you'll find often is if you can kind of get them to like commit to that, it's kind of like a foot in the door kind of thing. Like once they've gone through that, there's like a foot in the door, and then it's like less likely that they'll leave because they kind of always made a psychological commitment. Like, oh, okay, this video is what I wanted and it is for me. And so that's why you often see a much like larger spike at the beginning of a video, like drop off in your audience retention, and then it levels out a bit more later on. So making sure that that's really good is really useful. Another thing that I've been trying to do more, and I don't think this works for every single type of content, but for content like the ones I'm currently creating, which is like more talking head style videos, is trying to open up loops and trying to have hooks throughout the video. So a lot of the time we talk about having hooks at the beginning of the video, which is really important. And by hook, we mean like saying something that's going to induce someone to want to continue watching the video, maybe to get some sort of value from it that's promised. But doing that during the video, and there are people who are really good at that, especially in our niche, like Ed from Film Booth and all those guys, like they're really, really good at it. But trying to engineer these hooks throughout your video to try and subtly give people a reason to continue wanting to stick around or continue wanting to find like what's at the end of the video, or what's coming next up in the video, I think is really useful and probably a technique I've been using more and more and more. So I'm trying to give you an example because I know one's kind of complicated. I'm trying to think of like a good example. I think probably like one example of one way to do it is to have like, if you're teaching something, is to kind of like have a process as opposed to like a tips and tricks video. And the difference between like a process and the way a process hooks someone during the video is that like they kind of have to be there for the full thing. And then you can add in little lines and stuff throughout that process and say things like, you know, oh, make sure you do all these things in conjunction with each other because otherwise it won't work, or things like that. And then it's like subtly implied like, oh, well, I have to watch this whole thing, as opposed to like a tips and tricks video where it's just like, you know, if you get halfway through the video, it's like, well, you got half the tips, like you can leave if you want. Like it's not really going to negatively impact the knowledge that you've just learned. So that would be an example of like how to restructure a video so that you can, in a way that's going to try and increase watch time. There are also like little hooks and lines and stuff that one that I often like to use is to like address a problem and then talk about a couple of tips or solutions or something to the problem, and then share the most exciting one and then say, but we'll talk about that one later because first we have to blah, blah, blah. So I know we're getting like really into the weeds here, but I think this, because these concepts people sometimes struggle with in my experience. So
That's
like,
perfect.
if I'm like talking about watch time, for example, we're talking about watch time right now, and we've just been over like what watch time is, why it's so important, and why you need to, you know, use it to your advantage to grow on YouTube. I could say, and there are three major ways to improve watch time. The first one is to have great intros. The second one is to have hooks in your videos, and the third one is to I don't know, have like lots of pattern interrupts throughout your video. I'm not saying that is the list. I'm just pulling them out of my head. And then I could say something like, and pattern interrupts is probably one of the most important things and one of the most impactful things you can do to improve your watch time. But before we can talk about that, we need to address your intro, which comes first. And then I talk about the intro and whatever. And the intro is really important because it's like a tip that people want. And they're like, oh, like I need to hear the intro thing because that was one of the tips. But in their mind, they're also like, the most important one is the pattern interrupts thing. And that's at the end. I need to say to that. So it's like all these little psychological mind games that you can plan into your video. And again, it doesn't work for every type of content and again, that one was more specific, obviously like an education type channel. But if you can be strategic about how you do that, I think it can really have a big impact on your content. I talked a lot, but those are a few things.
It's what we're here to do, man. It's what we're here to do. You're here to talk a lot, which is good. It's so valuable, man, and it's so funny too. You have such an interesting channel because you're doing all these things, like you mentioned. It's like a psychological trick almost, and you can even share that in your videos. It's like, here's literally what I am doing in my videos to increase, my watch time. And so it's this weird thing where you as the viewer are like, he's like he's like telling me exactly how he's getting me right now, and it's still working. And I always laugh when I see that in videos. Like, I love the one that you just mentioned. Another common one I think we see is like, all right, in this video, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and be sure to stick around to the end, guys, because at the end, I'm going to do this bonus thing or this other thing. And I'm like, well, I want to see that thing. Yeah. All right, let me. And in the back of my head, same thing you mentioned. It's like, all right, I'm almost subconsciously committing. Like, well, all right, I will be sticking around to make sure I get the full bulk of this. And you mentioned loops. It's I loved in your video when you talked about loops, you highlighted all these comments that people share of like, God, this guy got me. I'm on like my 8th video watching his, because you give this very high quality video, and then at the very end of it, you go, now guys, if you want to learn way more about this one particular concept, click this video right here. And it's such just like a natural, organic. It's like, well, yeah, of course I want to watch that video next. After watching what I just watched, oh yeah, I mean, it only makes sense that I watch this next thing. It's incredibly masterful. Sort of switching gears here a little bit, but you're also a phenomenal editor. And for newer YouTubers who say have little to no editing experience, what are 3 fundamental tips, or like what are the first 3 skills or meta skills that anyone who wants to make better videos, piece better videos together, what are 3 things that you would tell someone out if they know nothing about editing?
I think the first one is usually that we almost always have more content in our videos than we should, and are so much more forgiving than we should. An exercise that I like to give to some of my students sometimes is like, all right, for your next video, make it double the length of what you would normally make it. So if they make 10-minute videos, usually like after the edit, I tell them to make a 20-minute video. And so they'll go away and they can do that. And when they come back, I'll be like, sweet. So you now got a 20-minute video. And by the way, it can be nuanced, because it's not like you want to add filler content. We're adding an extra 10 minutes of value. Like, so if it's an entertaining video, you're not just making the entertainment longer, you're adding more entertainment to make it more valuable. If it's a training video or a tips and tricks video, instead of doing 50 tips and tricks, you're doing 100 tips and tricks. So adding more value, not adding filler content. So I tell them, yeah, get it out to 20 minutes. And then when they come back with the 20-minute video, I'm like, all right, now cut it down to 10. And it's kind of hard, and it kind of like hurts, because it's like you put all this effort into this other content and you kind of don't want to get rid of it. But in reality, usually that's where it should, like, that's how harshly people should be cutting down their content. So that's an exercise that you can do on your own as well, by the way. You can create a video that's double the length, go away for like, and leave it for like a couple of days or a week, and then come back with fresh eyes and then recut it down. And then eventually you'll kind of calibrate yourself to the point where you realize like what should be in the video and what shouldn't be in the video. So that would be a big one, I think. Another one would be cutting out filler time, and that's one of the most common ones people do, is they leave in too much filler content. That's either like pauses between words, or they don't cut early enough. Like if there's a laugh in the video, for example, instead of cutting like partway through the laugh to the next clip, they'll let the whole laugh play out for the full 5 seconds or something, whatever it is. So really just cutting out as much, I call it dead time, as much space or irrelevant content that doesn't really add to the video, that if it wasn't in the video, it wouldn't be a negative thing. Like cutting out as much of that as possible. And then another easy trick, I guess I'm trying to keep these ones really practical, but another easy trick or something that I think is really important is to try and keep the video as visually stimulating as possible. And one of the simplest ways to do that is just to use punch-ins and punch-outs, which is like zooming in, 25 or 30% on the screen and zooming out. And as you go, you'll get to the point where you are able to sense like when you should be punching in and when you shouldn't. Usually you want to punch in to like emphasize a certain moment, or if something funny happened, you might punch in at that moment to kind of emphasize it, but it just changes the visual perspective a bit, and kind of refreshes the viewer's minds. And you'll see it in like on TV and stuff all the time. So if you're watching TV, or even if you're watching another YouTuber, like notice, like watch the screen. If they're showing a certain clip that's longer than 7 seconds or something like that, usually, and they don't cut to like B-roll or something like that, often they'll show that same clip, but they'll either show a different camera angle, or they'll just like zoom in on it a bit. It just changes the perspective up. And that's a really, really easy one you can do, because like you can do that on any piece of footage, regardless of what it is. Just if a certain clip's going for too long, 7 seconds is usually a decent one, but it can change for people. I think we normally aim for like 5 to 6 on a lot of GYGC videos, but that can be a lot of work. Just add punch-ins at relevant times, and it'll just make the video more engaging.
Yeah. The only reason I keep my 5 seconds of laughter in is because I want people to know how funny I really am. Yep, just like that. I'm going to leave that in. No, it's really good, man. And it's often, I love that exercise, the first one that you mentioned. And it's often these seemingly tedious, time-consuming exercises that, deliberate practice comes to mind. Like just deliberately strengthening a specific muscle in some sort of creativity. there's one for podcasting that I really enjoy. I did this for 2 weeks straight, and it was one of the most painful 2 weeks of my entire life, which was I just wanted to become a better speaker. I wanted to be more sharp with my words and how I articulated myself. I'm recording podcasts every single week. I have to have some sort of captivating voice and train of thought so that I'm not unbearable to listen to. And so I followed very similar advice to yours, actually, but just slightly different. I heard from a professional podcaster, which was record yourself for 5 to 10 minutes, just like with your phone or something. Record yourself just talking about something, your day, your opinion that you have on something, I don't know, something that happened in the news, telling a story. And when you're done, just stop the recording and don't listen to it. Wait until the next day to listen to it. That next day, listen to it, and then just cringe at how inarticulate you are, how many uhs and ums you spew, how many times you say like. And it's painful, man. It's hard. It's hard. But you very quickly are able to take notes on all of these little intricacies. And I guess to put it back to what you were saying, you see how much fat there is to trim. You see how much there is to just be cut, how much is not actually necessary with the finished product. So I absolutely love it. What is trend surfing?
Yeah, trend surfing is kind of a term that, or an analogy. I like my analogies because I think it helps people understand things. But
They're great.
it's like a way to describe a strategy or a concept, which is kind of relies on supply and kind of relies on supply and demand, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. But essentially, what you're trying to do is, instead of, a lot of the time, I think us YouTubers, we go out there and we feel like we have to generate all this attention from scratch. Like we have to create all the attention for our own videos just based on, an amazing title or an amazing thumbnail or amazing whatever. But often there are events or things or tentpole events happening out there that have a lot of attention around them already. And if you could just integrate parts of that within your content, you can kind of poach some of that attention. The To give you an example of that, I guess, to make it make sense, would be like, so one of the first times I did this successfully was back when I was creating like comedic gaming videos. And I remember at the time it was like just when Donald Trump was like about to be elected for the first time, or being elected or something like that. And I remember I created like a Donald Trump themed funny moments video. And that did really, really well. The actual video itself was like pretty much exactly the same as what I would normally have created. Actually, it was probably a bit worse than some of my other videos, to be honest. But because it had that trending twist on it, it did really well and got hundreds of thousands of views. So I guess there's two things you want to think about, though, or two major things that I would think about when you're trend surfing, like beyond just all the stuff we talked about previously and actually having good videos and that kind of thing. The first one is, you don't want to sacrifice your channel or yourself for a trend. So it's very easy. So like for me with my channel right now, as you mentioned earlier, I've got this Mr. Beast video that did really well. I could easily pump out a part 2 and a part 3 and a this and a that, and it'd probably get millions of views. But I don't want to do that because I don't want my channel to become a Mr. Beast fan page, because that's not going to be valuable long term for my audience. I did that once because I kind of just wanted to do it. And I think I even created a video on why I did it and how I did it as well, if anyone's interested in watching that. But yeah, like, so there are limits. Like obviously Mr. Beast is kind of a long-term trend in our YouTube niche at the moment, but I don't want to become a Mr. Beast fan page channel, so I'm not going to do that. So like you want to, or back to the Donald Trump themed video, like I could have created on that channel, I could have created like a Donald Trump political commentary video and maybe it would have done well. But like then my channel would have turned into like a political channel or a Donald Trump themed channel or whatever. I didn't want it to be that. Creating a Donald Trump themed funny moments video, still like it kept the core ethos of what I wanted to do and the type of person I was trying to attract. So that's the first thing to think about, is like, yeah, while trends are very important and can help you get a lot of views, you really want to make sure that you're getting the right type of views and it's not going to be hurting you in the long run. And then the second thing is to think about timing. So I like to call it surfing because anyone who's ever been surfing would know that if you try and catch a wave like just as it's peaking or just as it's breaking, like literally just as it's like coming crashing down, you're probably going to get smashed and get caught up in all the whitewash, and it's just not going to work. If you're trying to catch whitewash, like you can catch whitewash, but it's usually not as fulfilling as like catching a really clean, unbroken wave. So your goal is to kind of catch the wave at a point where it's kind of like rising up a bit, and you can see it's going to be a good wave and it's going to be a big wave, but not too late into the process because otherwise you get screwed. And I think trend surfing is the same as that. If you want to try and catch the trend early on, so that as it's rising up and getting a lot of attention, your video is the first one being pushed out there. I think that's another thing a lot of people miss is that they see a trend and they just go and create a video on it. And they're like, well, why didn't it work? It's like, because there's 16 gazillion other videos on that exact same thing right now. If you would create that exact same video 2 months ago, it probably would have blown up and might have got hundreds of thousands of views. So yeah, that's trend surfing in a nutshell. And those are probably two of the main things to think about if it's something you're considering trying.
Any other major examples come to mind as far as phenomenal videos that rode a trend?
Yeah, in terms of just phenomenal videos in general, like I've used this technique so many times on my channels or other people's channels, but like some really, probably one of the most well-known examples would be like the Mr. Beast Squid Games video. Like obviously it was a very good video, but the reason it did as well as it did was because Squid Games was like massive at that time. If he created a similar type of video, but it wasn't Squid Games themed or branded or anything like that, it wouldn't have got anywhere near as much attention as it has. So that's probably, the most prominent example I could think of.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not a Mr. Beast fan channel?
It's starting to look that way, maybe, isn't it? I think I've got like 3 videos.
No, super good, man. You mentioned, and this is big advice in the podcasting game, I guess just content creation in general, is one of the best things that you can do is collaborate. Find other people who are doing similar things to you, or people that you look up to, or people that maybe are at the same level as you, and do some sort of collaboration with them. And obviously, I mean, I rely on that. I guess collaborate with creators all the time because I interview them and I, dive into their YouTube channels and what they're interested in. But as a YouTuber specifically, how would you recommend people go about pursuing collaborations with other YouTubers?
I have a whole course on this actually because I think it's so important, but no one really thinks collaborations are that important, so no one buys the course. But and that's not a plug, by the way. I'm not going to tell you the name of the course, so you can't buy it. I think I think one of the things that blows my mind that people don't realize that I think is so powerful is that you don't have to just collaborate with people who are on your level. Like collaboration is a value exchange. The most traditional form of that is you're exchanging the value of exposure to your audience in exchange for them giving you the value of exposure to their audience. But exposure isn't the only currency in this game. So something that I used to be able to do, and like all the time, and it would work like really well when I was smaller, and when I was smaller and I had the skills, but I might not have had the followers. I would reach out to big creators, and firstly, I would do a whole bunch of research. I'd find a creator that I liked in a niche that I liked, and I'd do a whole bunch of research into that niche. I'd try and find like really good viral video ideas. I'd try and create basically the best video possible, or best video outline possible, and create an amazing thumbnail and title and all that kind of thing. And then I'd reach out to these creators and be like, hey, I really love your channel, blah, blah, blah. Love to work together. Here's this video idea that I've really thoroughly researched that I think will do really well for X, Y, Z reason. Like, here's what, and I'd love to do it with you. And I'm happy to do all of the editing, to do all of the scripting and all of the work. Like, all you literally have to do is show up for like 20, 30 minutes or whatever it is and help me like record and create.
Mm.
Because the thing a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of these big creators, they're trying to put out more content that's good content that gets views, that works, but they don't have time and they struggle with time. And so for them, even though they're not going to get any exposure from your small channel, it's still a win because they're getting a piece of content created for like 20 minutes of work that's like a really good piece of content, as opposed to, you know, them having to spend 4 or 5 hours on it themselves. And so obviously there's a level, like there's a level, like you can't go reaching out to a creator with like 1 million subscribers when you got like 100 and try and use this because it's probably not going to work. But like within like a 10x rule, I like to think about it. So like if you've got, you know, 1,000 subscribers, you can do this to someone who's got 10,000 subscribers, and you'd be surprised how likely they are to say yes, even though they're 10 times your size. So yeah, like as an overarching concept, I do think collaborations are really valuable. But like, don't settle for just that classic, I've got 50 subscribers, he's got 50 subscribers, I'll just collaborate with him. Like that can work, but like you can be getting so much more value for that time spent collaborating with someone who has 500 subscribers.
Completely. Completely. I really love that you shared all of that. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this show is people that you think are just like above you. And I think you mentioned this at the start of this conversation, which was, oh, this person has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. They are at another level. They have something that I don't have. They sit at a table that I don't sit at. They are above me. And obviously, I reach out to people every week to invite them on this show. Most people don't respond. That's just, in my opinion, just kind of a normal conversion rate, especially for some schmo who they've never heard of. But I'm always shocked because it's like people do respond. I mean, to be candid, I mean, I emailed you. You responded to my email and agreed to sit down with me today and have this conversation. And I guess to really detail the answer you just gave, and I guess to put you on the spot a little bit, you had never heard of me when I emailed and reached out to you. Why did you say yes to this conversation today?
Nah, because I like the sound of my own voice. Nah. I think it's, yeah, I don't know. I think a couple of reasons. Like, I enjoy talking about this stuff. Like, you seem to be doing some really cool work, so I wanted to help support that in a way if I could. And obviously, there's always the value as well of potentially like me being able to use some of this and cut it, maybe clips or something into my own type of video. But I think a point you brought up there is really valuable and also something that might be useful for people to know. And that is like even really, really large YouTubers who you might think are getting huge amounts of messages and aren't reading their messages. Often they do read them and they just don't get back to you, or they have an assistant read them. So if you have something interesting enough or something good enough, chances are they'll see it. Because like, remember, that email address on their YouTube channel is the same email address that brands and sponsors contact them through. So like they're checking that email address because they might have some big brand deal come through that's paying them tens of thousands of dollars, and they don't want to miss that. So if you're using that exact same email, they probably see you. The problem is most people reach out, and I get this all the time. It's like, oh, can you help me? Can you give me a shout out? Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And it's very them centered, and they don't think at all about like why it would benefit me beyond just being philanthropic. And sometimes it's okay to help people out. Like I created a whole video for free on this dude who, like a 27-minute video on this dude who just randomly reached out and emailed me and like reviewing his whole channel and all that kind of thing. Sometimes you do that. But like I have limited time just like everyone else. And so it usually has to be something like relatively interesting or relatively good for me to want to try it out. And so if you're reaching out to people and stuff, the first thing is a lot of the time, those YouTubers or at least their assistants actually do see your emails. Or a reason you're probably, like you said, there'll obviously be a very large percentage who won't be able to get back to you because of time or things like that. But if you're able to add enough value to them and make it enticing enough to them instead of making it all about how they can help you, you'll probably find that you'll actually start getting responses from people who you would never have thought you would get responses from.
Completely. What I heard from all of that was you love the sound of your own voice and you are bleeding me dry for more content.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's what I
Yeah,
heard.
yeah, that's it. That's it.
No, thank you for saying all of that. And I didn't ask you that question just to fish for compliments or praise or anything, but yeah, like you said earlier, it's just a very important point to drive home. People are just people, regardless of the size of their channels or how successful they are. Like at the other end of that email address is just some other human being who may or may not be interested. So you might as well hit send. So thank you for that. Let's bring this home, Marcus. I have a question that I'm going to ask you here at the end. Stay tuned till the end to hear it.
It's a bit late, 56 minutes in. Might have wanted to play that card a bit earlier.
I'm practicing. I'm learning. There's a question that I ask everyone that I have on this show, which we'll end with. But the last really practical YouTube thing that I'd love to dive into is YouTube Shorts. I literally just posted my first YouTube short today. It's something that I'll start doing on a weekly basis now. I wasn't really thinking about it prior to. And I would love to know just YouTube Shorts 101. What are the most important things for YouTubers to know before they start actually making shorts?
Yeah, the only important thing is just keeping people watching for as long as possible. Like click-through rate doesn't matter. Like pretty much nothing matters except for audience retention in shorts. The goal is to have your short be so good that people actually watch it multiple times, and then your audience retention is in the positives. Like you'll see, it's like plus 100%. So you'll see a lot of these videos that start to blow up. As they start to blow up, or these shorts that start to blow up, they'll have like an audience retention of like 130% or something like that, because people are just rewatching it, and that's going to give you a huge advantage over a lot of other shorts on that shorts shelf. Now, often as it tends to blow up, like that number tends to go down. But like if you want a specific thing to aim for, I would say like aim to get more than 100% retention. If you can be doing that reliably on your shorts, then eventually one's going to hit. In terms of how to do that, yeah, it's pretty much just keeping the video as fast-paced as possible, making sure the concept is really interesting. The hook is obviously so important, like the first couple of seconds. Something that tends to work well is having like text pop up on shorts, like as you're saying things, but most people probably know that because if you've ever watched more than 3 shorts in your life, you probably would have seen that technique being used. Yeah, a lot of it is like very fundamental. Like a lot of it is very fundamental stuff. Yeah, sure, there are tips and there are tricks. I've got a video on my channel that's like 28 shorts, tips and tricks. But like, even if you didn't follow any of those tips and tricks, but you had a great hook, you had an awesome idea, you had retention that kept people all the way to the end and above, so that you were getting above 100% retention. Like, you don't even need to know any of those tips, and your short will probably do well.
Is it possible for shorts to quote unquote damage a channel? Because I've seen YouTube channels where their shorts are like millions and millions of views. Every short has hundreds of thousands of views, and they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And then you look at their long form videos, and the most views any of their long form has is like 4,000. Super disproportionate to the amount of subscribers they actually have. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, good question. That's a very good question. It's something I'm planning on looking into a lot more thoroughly. YouTube's official stance on it is no. But I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, maybe I don't believe them. I think some of those channels that have a huge amount of subscribers and do really well with shorts and not long form content, it might not necessarily be that the long form content is being hurt by the shorts. It's just all their subscribers have come from shorts, and shorts viewers tend to want to watch shorts content. So like they have large channels, but no one's going to watch their long form content because they're all there for the shorts. So it's not that the long form content was hurt because of shorts. It's just like you almost think about it as like two separate audiences. There's the YouTube shorts audience for the channel, and there's the long form content audience for the channel. And the long form content or the short form content audience aren't going to watch the long form content. But the thing I want to look into that I haven't had a chance to like properly study yet, and no one's really, again, YouTube's stance on this is like, no, post as many shorts as you want, like it doesn't hurt. But like from a just a common sense perspective, I'm interested in, so YouTube Shorts obviously attract, well, you'd assume they attract people who are wanting to watch more high intensity, shorter, like lower attention span type content. If you're bringing that type of person to your channel and then encouraging them to watch your long form content, um, does that, and let's say they do go to your long form content, that person, in my mind, would probably be more likely to watch less of a video, like a long form video, like you know, than maybe an average viewer, and so that would bring your audience retention down, which might hurt that video in the long run. Now, I do think there are some caveats. Well, then firstly, I don't know if that's true. Like, I haven't actually tested that or studied that. That's just kind of like a thing I've been thinking about recently and been wanting to try and find a way to test it. Again, YouTube's stance on it is like, no, it doesn't hurt. It's like totally fine, all that kind of thing. And maybe they're right. But that is something I want to look into before I, 100% be like, yeah, no, it doesn't. I will say though, is that it would take a lot of shorts views to like really, like, even if what I just shared is true, I think it'd take a lot of views to really have a big negative impact. So like for my students and stuff, when we're trying to like reach the first 1,000 subscribers, we often do use shorts like relatively frequently. And even if I found what I just talked about to be true, there's a chance we might not stop doing that, because if you're trying to, like, often reaching your first 1,000 subscribers is what people want to do because they want to be able to get monetized. And so I'm like, well, even if it does make your overall channel like retention and some of your retention for other videos a little bit lower than they could be, but you get to the point where you can be monetized faster, like that might be a trade-off I would be willing to take, and then kind of back off shorts a bit and focus on long form content to get that back up to where you want it to be. But yeah, a lot of brain vomit there, I guess, because it seems like a bit of a complex one. So long story short would be YouTube's official stance is no, they don't. I have some questions, but I think people should only be worrying about it if their shorts are getting like a lot of views. Like, we're not like your short that got 1,000 views, not your short specifically. I'm just giving you an example, but a short that gets like 1,000.
I was like, my short already got 1,000 views. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, like that's not going to destroy your channel or anything like that. So, but yeah, it's an interesting one.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, thank you. Last question for you, Marcus. What is the number one piece of advice that you would give yourself when you first started creating content?
I mean, there's so many things, but like a quote that I like and I think about a lot often, because I tend to get stuck into the trap of not doing this, is to be true to the vision, but to be open to how it plays out, which kind of goes back to the green dot theory we talked about. Like, I remember there were certain series and types of videos that I had on my channel when I first started, and I made tens of videos on them. And it was clear after the first five or three or episodes that no one wanted to watch them. But I kept going with them because I was like, no, I'm going to make this work. Consistency. Yeah, I think it's okay to quit micro level, not macro level. If you really want to be a YouTuber, yeah, don't quit YouTube, but like don't keep doing that series that you have been doing for the last 20 episodes that's gotten like 5 views on every single one, because chances are your 21st episode is also going to get 5 views unless something absolutely drastic changes, in which case you could almost argue that you did micro quit doing something to some extent. So yeah, I think that's probably what it would be.
It's really good. It's really good, man. You said it earlier in the episode, but I think work hard is very bad advice. because it's so incomplete. It doesn't really give you any specific tactics. Like, you could work really, really hard. I could work way harder than I work right now by just going down the street, finding a giant pile of boulders, and then spending every day for a month just like picking up a boulder and moving it to the other side of the city. That would be hard work. It'd be very, very hard work. I would be working very, very hard, very strenuous, probably get in great shape. But what the hell? I mean, what would that do? I would make no money. Maybe, I'm sure there's content available there, but it just wouldn't move the needle at all. So I really love that. I love everything that you shared today, man. This was a lovely conversation. I mentioned at the beginning, it's just an honor to sit down and talk to you. I watch your stuff. I'm a big fan. So at the end here, you've mentioned throughout you have students. Can you tell everybody what you got going on aside from your YouTube channels? And yeah, where can people find you if they want to check out more of what you have to offer?
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. So the YouTube channel is called Grow Your Gaming Channel, even though content is most of it's applicable to any YouTube channel, to be honest. That's just was me following my own advice and picking a small niche when I started out, and I haven't officially transitioned out of it. Yeah, in terms of the stuff I do outside of that, probably the main one that people like is I've got a challenge called the 4-digit challenge, 4-digit 90 challenge, and basically it's a challenge where I take people over the course of 90 days, send like video lessons every single day with like take action checklists and worksheets every day. Kind of the goal is to help you get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the challenge, by the end of the 90 days. And I like to think that for people who actually follow the process, it works for a huge amount of them. But basically, I guess my thing is like, if it doesn't work for you, I basically just refund people. So that's not necessarily a 100% guarantee of success just because you have a credit card. But it's like, yeah, if you actually do, basically, if you do what I tell you to do and it doesn't work, then I'll give you your money back, which is actually rare. I don't think it's probably only happened like once or twice. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do. That's where the main, free content on YouTube. It's a lot of, I hope to say there's a lot of value there. And then for people who want to go deeper and actually want like more step-by-step help and more in-depth advice, the 4-digit challenge is probably a good place to go.
I will link to all of it in the show notes. Marcus, you are the man. You're one of the best in the business, and I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.